Hi everyone, welcome back to the second episode of this entire series all about Canadian tax in Dynamics FNO. So if you have missed the previous first session about introduction, I will put the link in the description box. Feel free to check it out before you move on the second episode. Right, so for today's session, we want to focus and zoom in to talk about all the configurations needed to have the testing flow going forward, right? And in terms of configurations, here you can see I listed all the key points, and there are some dependencies we need to follow a specific order that you're going to see just in a second through that demo, right? So just a high level, we will cover sales tax authorities, settlement periods, posting, and codes, and also how you group those sales tax codes. And with that, let's move on to review what are the dependencies when we start doing the configurations. And also just a reminder here, please like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts. Thank you for the support. Okay, so in terms of configurations, as I said, we need to follow a specific order. And in this slide, you can see I listed like really per order. First step, we need to set up the sales tax authorities because there might be some information on the following steps that requires this sales tax authority to link to other parameters. And let me just give you a quick overview about what are those configuration points about. Okay, let's start with the first point, sales tax authorities. So basically, this is the entity to which collected sales tax needs to be reported and paid out. And depending on the country and the region, it can be different. And in our scenario for Canada, overall the high level is CRA. I think it's Canadian Revenue Agency, but you can pay sales taxes to the authority directly or through a vendor account that you create for the sales tax authority. So now let's switch to the system and I will show you what that looks like for a sales tax authority. So I will open up my Dynamics account and let me show you the path again. So let me go back to home page, and you have a specific module tax here. You can navigate, and the difference is the key concepts or configuration points are listed in their sales tax option. So first thing we talked about is sales tax authorities. And as you can see, I'm in the demo environment, so I have quite some tax authorities set up, but mostly for the US, Colorado, Washington, DC, for example. But in our scenario, we only want to focus on Canada. So as I mentioned, that's going to be CRA. Okay, I didn't create anything, so now we can create a new value together. So now I'm going to click New Authority. This is kind of an abbreviation. I'll just put CRA and give a name. So let me type Canada Revenue Agency, right? And if you have a vendor account for the CRA where you are going to make payments, then you can pick this vendor account from this drop down, then the system will help you automate the payment process. So I don't have a specific one, but we can just pick a random one just as an example. And next thing regarding report layout. So you know that through all the tax transactions, you're going to generate some system standard reports. And here for CRA, you can define, okay, the generated reporting should follow which standard. And for Canadian, as of now, I just use this US report layout, but feel free to explore other type of reports and different layouts if this one does not suffice. So I'm going to pick this US report layout. Rounding form, I'm going to keep normal, but you can keep some specificity for the rounding side. Address, of course, if you have an address, feel free to add a new here. Contact information, same thing. Those are not mandatory fields. And that's it. So this is your first sales tax authorities. I'm going to save it. And one thing to note though, in my scenario, I just assume that all different jurisdictions or regions are going to point to the same tax authority CRA. But let's say if you need to report tax per region, which is likely the case, or per tax territory, then what you need to do here is basically create separate tax authorities for different jurisdictions. So for example, if you're going to need to report to BC tax authorities, then we can create a abbreviation BCTA, and that's going to be British Columbia tax authorities. I'll just use abbreviations. Authorities. All right, so now I have finished this one. If you have a vendor account, it's exactly the same thing. You just need to create each authority as an individual record. Okay, now we're done. So I'm going to remove this BC as for this demo purposes. I'll just keep one single authority. Now we finalize the sales tax authorities. Let's go back to the PowerPoint to see what's the next step. And from here, next step is going to be your sales tax settlement periods. So what does that mean? Basically, the sales tax settlement periods contain the information about the period intervals for which sales tax needs to be reported and paid. Again, that depends on different territories or jurisdictions. And let me go to the system so we can see how the configurations can be done for the settlement periods. Again, I will go back to the tax module and enter sales tax section. You have the sales tax settlement periods, and when I open it up, you can see the settlement period requires authority. So that's why we need to first create the authority. There is a certain order and dependency. And now, again, this is demo data. You can ignore. This is for the US. But let's assume I need to create some values for a Canadian. And remember, in my scenario, I only have monthly and annually as settlement or filing period. So let me go back to the PowerPoint. We can go back to the previous slide we talked about from previous session. Remember to check that out. So in this table, you can see the filing period are only monthly and annually. So I think this is an error for Quebec. That's actually need to be annually. And in that case, let's go back to the system. So I will create a new value and I will call it monthly. The description, you can say monthly settlement, and you see the authority is a mandatory field. So now I'm going to link to my CRA, Canada Revenue Agency, but let's say if you need to have a different jurisdiction as authority, then in that case you need to have a kind of each record for each authority. All right, and then let's move on. You can define in terms of payment and then period interval unit. So that means how often should you report or file the tax to this jurisdiction or authority. So this is monthly, so I'm going to pick that interval unit, month, and then the period duration is going to be 1 month, right? And then from there, based on this criteria, the system is going to generate all the relevant periods intervals automatically. I'm going to add a new record from date 1/1/2024, for example, to dates. You can manually key in those information on monthly basis, but if you want to generate by the system, then you can say new period intervals. Okay, now I get a warning saying I have to create a kind of a first example, and then the system can auto-generate based on the start date. So let's go to 1/1/2024. To date is going to be 1/31/2024. All right, and then from there we can say new period interval, and the system is auto-generating the February period, and you just need to add as many as you need, right? Okay, and that's basically everything we need on the settlement periods, what we need to set up, right? The second one we need is for annually filing, so that's mainly for Quebec. So I just click new record, and in this case it's going to be annually, and then annually settlement. So the main difference is going to be the period interval unit. Instead of month, I'm going to pick 1 year. And again, same thing, I'm going to add a from date. So that's my start date, 1/1/2024. And to date, that's going to be year end. Let's say if I'm using 12/31 as my year end, then that's going to be this date. So new period interval, the system is giving me the next period for 2025 fiscal year. All right, now I can save it, and we are done with the sales tax settlement periods. So let's go back to my PowerPoint. What's next? And coming back to the slide. Okay, now we have finalized step 2 for sales tax settlement periods. We're going to move on for step 3, which is ledger posting groups. So what does that mean? Basically, a sales tax is calculated and posted to the main accounts that are specified in the ledger posting group, so in this step. And that ledger posting groups are attached to each sales tax code. So you can basically set up individual ledger posting groups for each sales tax code, or use one ledger posting group for all the sales tax codes. So how can you define and decide? Basically, in our scenario, when I come back to this previous rules, so what do you see is we have different jurisdictions, and for each jurisdiction, there is a GL code required. So that's the case why we will need to have separate ledger posting group per jurisdiction to handle that GL code differences, right? So now I will go back to the system. One thing to note though, here I'm in the US legal entity, and that's when I start showing this ledger posting group under setup section. You're going to see some slight differences, right? Because you have this sales tax payable, use tax payable, but because that localization is in US. But now if we go to a Canadian legal entity, I'm going to pull up another environment, and clearly what you see is different. So we have sales tax payable, sales tax receivable. This one is kind of in addition to the US version, right? So that's based on your legal entity's location and addresses. Okay, now let's see how we're going to create new values. So again, under ledger posting group, in this Canadian environment, we have already created each ledger posting per jurisdiction. So in my case, this first record you see is BC, and in the description we can put PST basically as indication. BC is relevant for PST. And then now we need to understand which GL account should be put into which box. First thing, sales tax payable. So in this field, you need to select the main account for outgoing sales taxes that are payable to the tax authority. So mainly on the sales side. So when you sell an item, product, or services, sales tax are collected on behalf of the tax authority. And eventually we'll need to consider this as a payable, right? And that's why this is the account for BC sales tax payable. And then you also have the sales tax receivable. That's basically on the purchasing side. When you purchase something, you're going to pay out the tax. Eventually you might get the credits, right? So in that case, you need to select the main account for incoming taxes that are received from the tax authority. So that's why in this case, we're using this GL input tax credits, right? Okay, so now this is really straightforward for one region. And if we move on, we have another one for GST, basically with different accounts. And you can find that rules from our slide we listed. So for Alberta GST, those are the two GLs, one on sales side, one on purchase side. Same thing for BC and all other areas. That's why you need to collect this information from your customer at the beginning. So now you know how to configure those GL accounts. And we do notice for HST, for example, Ontario, we don't have any additional GL accounts to track that because we consider HST as GST kind of posting because we just have a combined rate. That's why, I don't have anything specific for HST. I only have all those PSE related for British Columbia, MB, QC, and SK, where they have a different sales tax payable GL accounts. So I hope this is helpful and straightforward to understand. And one thing to note I want to highlight is regarding those GLs. So let's do right-click View Details. In order to be able to pick this GL account in this tax form, you need to make sure the posting type here on the main account level is sales tax. So like other random GL accounts, you don't necessarily need to put this posting type, but if that GL is going to be used on the tax portion, then this posting type needs to be changed to sales tax type. All right, so now we're done with step 3. Let's go back to our slide. So step 4 is going to be your sales tax codes. Okay, so that's kind of a self-explanatory. You're going to use the sales tax codes which are created for every indirect tax or duty that the legal entity is obligated to calculate, collect, and pay to the sales tax authorities. And also the unique rates that can be assigned to a vendor and customer or on the item, right? So now let's have a look in that Canadian legal entity. I have already created those sales tax codes. Let me switch back to the system. So we need to go back to the tax module, or you can also just use this back button. And within tax module, we can see the sales tax codes is the first option here. And basically, what you need to list here is all the individual relevant tax code. In our scenario, it's going to be your GST 5% at the federal level, and also all the PST, for example, British Columbia, that's the PST 7%, for MB 7%, HST, that's going to be 13%, QST 9.975%, and also SK at the 6% PST level. You basically just take this PowerPoint as a reference, and you need to make sure all those individual rates are created in the system without duplicates, right? Now let's take a zoom on each code. So GST is the most straightforward. I gave the sales tax code number and then name. Now you need to assign the percentage of 5%. So how you achieve that is going to through this sales tax code option, go to values, and then you see the value here. I put the 5% for the specific tax code. And also one thing to remember is in case this tax code is no longer the case, or there's any changes from the government side, or it's not too common, but if that happens, you can give a from date and to date, basically retire this sales tax code rate without deleting it, keeping kind of a historical record, right? So I'm going to go back. And what's other required information here? Settlement period. That's our previous step. We create a monthly reporting for this tax code. And then ledger posting group is going to use this Canada for GST, GL accounts, sales tax currency, CAD. Of course, you have other plenty parameters you can check for the printing on invoice, etc. Right? So in my case, I'll just stick to the most straightforward. Those are kind of the most important thing you need to set up for each tax code. Same thing for the PST. So exactly having the percentage assigned to 7% for the PST, and then ledger posting, MB, monthly, and also in CAD. So that's how you achieve this. Now we have this step completed. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. So we have sales tax code. Now, next question is how we're going to group that sales tax codes to make it more straightforward for user to select either on master data and also on the transaction item side, right? So that's basically our item 5 and 6, sales tax groups and item sales tax groups. Sales tax groups are a group of sales tax codes that are attached to the customers and vendors, mainly on the master data side, right? And then the item sales tax group is they're used to attach to the resources like products or services. And again, that ties back to our introduction session, how Dynamics is using the logic to calculate sales tax code. You have two elements. One is sales tax groups on the vendor customer side. One is on the item side, so that's item sales tax groups. So if you missed that video, feel free to check it out. Link is in the description box. So just a refresher here, the system is going to use the common rate between sales tax groups and item sales tax groups. Okay, now we can go back to the system and see how we can group those. So in my scenario, I basically, for item, I don't want to have any refine. I don't need that refine level per product category or product type because GL posting is always the same, but you may have some refined requirements from the customer to really detail down per each item group. So let's have a look. Item sales task group here, most straightforward. In my case, I will just use this V2 version. And within this V2 version, I basically have all the sales tax codes I created previously. And that's going to cover all the items or services on which sales tax codes are applied, right? And you also see this 0% that I need to create on the sales tax code side. Basically, that's tax exempt, right? And you can also set up some exempt code and you can also set up some tax exempt code for reporting purposes, but we're not going to talk that in details today. So just know that this is my current item sales tax groups, including all those codes. And now we're having a look at our sales tax groups, which is on the customer vendor side. And basically, for example, I created a per jurisdiction as well, BC, PST. What you can see is now within this group, what are the codes included, right? So you have the sales tax code 7% and also the GST tax code 5%. So the purpose of designing your sales tax group and item sales tax group is really to help the system to find out the common rate for it to perform that calculation. So in my scenario, if I have a customer based in BC, then on the customer side, you're going to find the 7%, 5% eligible. And then on the other hand, if I have an item selected on that sales order, and that item will carry all the available sales tax codes, including the 7% and 5%. So those two are the common rates. And then the system is going to apply 5% as GST and 7% as British Columbia. So since my item sales tax group is really large with the value all to include everything, then I need to restrict on my sales tax group side to make sure only unique and required tax rates can be selected through that common value. So I hope that makes sense. And just another example, if I'm choosing the GST, then only 5% is required. I don't need any PST or HST. And then you may have other groups like for international, that's going to be tax exempt. So that's 0%. And Ontario, that's our HST scenario. For HST, I'm going to include only one single HST code, 13%, and I'm good. I don't need to charge GST on this one, right? So this is how you map up your sales tax groups and item sales tax groups. All right, so I think this video is long enough to cover all the key concepts within tax module. Now we can say our configurations are 80% done. And from there, on the next episode, we're going to understand how the tax values can be defaulted. For example, on vendor and customer accounts, which value should I assign? Which tax group should I assign? And what item sales tax group should I assign to, right? We're going to cover that portion in the next video and explain how values get defaulted. All right, thank you for watching. See you in the next one.